So far, it seems like this channel has just been a game of how many different black shirts can Jordan wear before she runs out. Hey guys, welcome back to another Sketchbook Sunday video. So today's video is structured in a very similar manner to my previous Sketchbook Sunday videos, where I sort of bounce around from page to page and focus a lot more on the actual process than the finished product. So I did come into today's pages with one thought in mind, and that was that I wanted to draw a person with a different body type than I'm used to drawing. And I've noticed this recently, that all of the people that I draw have very similar builds. And not only is that unrealistic, but it's just something that I'm not particularly proud of in my artwork, so I really wanted to push those boundaries and see what I could do. So I hope you guys enjoy the process, and I will see you there. So the first thing that I started with in today's sketchbook session was this old scan of a piece I had done a little while back, and essentially what I had done was worked in watercolor first, then scanned it into my computer and did the line work digitally. And I really liked the way that it turned out, so I printed out a bunch of copies and have been sporadically using them over time. And the main reason I was drawn to this piece specifically was actually the portrait on the other page that I had worked on, and it just sort of reminded me of a similar theme, and I kind of wanted to expand and play with that theme. So the first thing I did was I cut it out and I started gluing it into my sketchbook, and I wanted to do it over 2 pages. And then I ended up drawing some scales, because even though in my brain this was not a mermaid per se, it was more of some sort of magic-oriented water creature, I wanted to incorporate scales onto the page because I've always thought they're interesting to look at. Something else that I have failed to mention over the past few videos is that when I work in my sketchbook, I never really feel the need to use really expensive supplies. This is the Michaels watercolor set that you can get for, I think, just $5. And it's the Artist Loft brand, and honestly, I used this for a very long time before I even invested in any professional grade watercolors. And it's a really good set. There's a lot of colors and they layer really well and give a lot of interesting texture. And I still really enjoy using them in my sketchbooks because it's a lot of pressure off. And if you look at the set itself, I definitely have gotten a lot of use out of them. Something else I've also been trying to incorporate into my sketchbooks is little thoughts and quotes. And you can see this a little bit in last week's Sketchbook Sunday video, where I incorporated a quote into my islands page. So the next thing I did was I moved on to this portrait that actually inspired the other page, and I wanted to start adding some shading and coloring with colored pencils. And this is another example of using cheap supplies in my sketchbook. This was actually done on a piece of copy paper that I taped into my journal, and I'm using Crayola colored pencils to add the shading. I have Prismacolor, but for practice, I really don't see a problem with using the cheapest stuff you have. So the next page that I worked on is sort of what I was talking about in the introduction, where I wanted to try to draw a girl with a different body type than I was used to. And it definitely was difficult because I have a certain way that I draw things, and even though I know proportions and how proportions work, they definitely translate differently to a different body type. So I think that it definitely will benefit me in the long run when it comes to things like anatomy. So I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do with this going into it, so I just used a regular school pencil to do the sketching, nothing fancy. And I wanted to make sure that I got the body type right, since that was the entire reason that I had started this page in the first place. And I also put a lot of effort into the wrinkles of the clothing, because that's something else that lately I've found myself sort of slacking on. It's not that I don't know how to do it, but I've noticed that sometimes I don't incorporate it just because it's easier to not. Then I pulled out my watercolors again and I started adding color on top of the pencil. And I really liked the effect because it's a lot less clean than how I typically tend to work. And working on top of the sort of chalky, cheap watercolor with a pencil was actually really enjoyable and soothing, and I found it a lot of fun to work with. And I think this is one of the benefits that you get with a sketchbook as opposed to working on something in a finished piece format, because there's a lot less pressure to create something to sell, and so you're a lot more willing to sort of push yourself outside of what you might have done before. I really enjoyed this little session in my sketchbook. I think it was a lot of fun to try new things that I might not have done otherwise, and I think this is why I would encourage you to start a sketchbook if you haven't done so already, or just continue to work in the one that you already have. And then, as you can see, I used the watercolors to turn the circle that was placed behind her into a sun and created a sort of sunset effect. And I may add more to this page in the future, I'm not sure, but at this point I am really happy with the way that it turned out. So the piece that I glued to the other page is actually something that I had done a jelly printing technique on and cut circles out of, and it was basically a scrap that I could have thrown away, but I thought it would be a lot more interesting to incorporate it into the page. And even though I haven't finished this page in my sketchbook yet, the idea was that I would draw little things inside of all of the circles. And you'll see here in a minute that I actually do end up doing that in one of them. It's a matter of getting outside of your own head and actually just going with the flow and letting the creativity that you do have sort of impact the work that you're doing. Because for a little while there, I was slacking on my sketchbook because I was so focused on creating finished things to sell. And looking at this girl with the sunset in the background and the butterfly in her hair, I like the idea of drawing a girl with a butterfly in her hair. But if I hadn't collaged that piece of a butterfly into her hair, I'm not sure if I would have come up with that concept in the first place. So I hope you all enjoyed this video. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye. That was my stomach. I also did my nails for like the first time in months, and I don't know why I did it, because the second I did it I realized why I don't paint my nails, because I messed one up already. But anyhow, I need to do this introduction, and I need to do it with confidence. Like, I don't know why it's like so formal. Like, when it gets formal is when my brain just short circuits. Like, I can sit here lecturing myself forever. That's fine. That's not a problem. The problem becomes when I actually have to do something with that lecturing to myself. How these videos... Wow. That was fun.